A very warm welcome to all our participants today. Bhaumik, Bhavik, Chetan, Hilag, Hiral, Pooja, Sandra, Udhav, Vikas, Amit, Hiral, Lisa, Parvati, Pranavsha. Thank you all for joining in today.
Thank you all for joining on a working day for this interaction.
So we have a couple of minutes before we begin with our today's session. Yes, Vikas. Yes, because you can post your question in the chat box. Thank you, Vikas, for your question. We will have this answered in our question and answer session.
Thank you everyone for joining in this afternoon. We'll just wait a couple of minutes for more attendees to come in.
So, well, it's time to begin with our today's webinar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Book production is a complex process that begins with detailed planning. You have done your research and you have decided that self-publishing is the route for you. It can be very daunting trying to figure out exactly where to start and who to approach. Vikas has just released his debut book, HR in My Heart, which got great reviews in the world of business from leaders like Harjeet Khanduja and Yuvraj Srivastava. It's a book on his leadership lessons that he has presented in a unique manner by combining prose and poetry. In this masterclass, we will not only learn more about the book, but he will also be sharing the entire process of getting a book out in the world. HR Association of India welcomes you all to the 2021 Dialogue, a masterclass on the topic, the making of a book. To know more about HRAI and its event, I would request all our participants to visit the link and details posted in the chat window. Request all the participants to kindly follow the webinar guidelines mentioned in the chat window. It would be great to have all the participants' feedback. We will be running a poll before the Q&A session request all the participants to kindly give your feedback on the session. I now take the privilege to introduce our esteemed speaker for today, Mr. Vikas Dua, Chief HR Mentor, ATTAYN, and Advisor, BRICS Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Vikas is a Chief HR Mentor at ATTAYN, a disruptive HR tech firm working on embracing and democratizing knowledge sharing in the academic space. He is an accomplished HR expert with over 18 years of experience in the recruitment field. Vikas has worked with both startups and large corporations like Wipro and Concentrix, driving hiring in the APAC region. As advisor to the BRICS Chamber of Commerce and Industry and member of the Industry Council of FWA, Vikas is also working towards supporting the students and young professional community in their learning and entrepreneurship objectives. Vikas is also a TEDx speaker and a vlogger and blogger on HR practices, sharing his learning under his self-designed HR in My Heart brand umbrella. His writings have been published by leading HR magazines such as Human Capital and People Matters and the Global Talent Culture Working of Work blog. You can also follow him on LinkedIn and the link mentioned in the chat window. I now welcome Mr. Vikas Dua to take over this session.
Thank you so much, Peterson, for introducing me and bringing me onto the stage. Let me share my presentation.
Sure.
And thank you, dear audience, for taking out the time on this weekday and joining in this session on the making of a book. I'm really excited to share some of my learnings with you, and extremely thankful to Peterson, the HRAI team, Dr. Ankita Singh for encouraging such discussions and helping word spread regarding not only what would typically associate HRAI with the HR domain, but going much more beyond that. And I think that's a great service they are doing. Thank you so much, Peterson. And when it comes to talking about the making of this book, I wanted to lay it all out there for you. I'm sure all of you who've joined in today, given that it's a very niche and specific topic, somewhere are aspiring to write your own book, or have thought of at some point and been contemplating whether you should take the plunge or not. Hopefully during this, about an hour's session, we will get a sense of, is that something that you should work towards? Should you take that plunge? And if I can in some way help in sharing some tips and guidance for you that can help you cut down those timelines and become more, effective in your book writing plan, I think I'll be very grateful. My objective today would have been met. And that's the reason, I'm really glad to be part of this session today. So the book that we're talking about is really this. It's HR in My Heart, Leadership Lessons Like Never Before. This is my first ever book. It has just hit the online stores last Saturday, which was the 6th. And I'm extremely excited. Just 3 days down, getting a very good response, like Peterson shared. And some of the learning, some of the mistakes that I made during this journey is what I'll try and share with you. So I have a little process that I've kind of created when it comes to getting your book out there into the hands of people. It's one thing having a thought in your mind, which is similar to, you saw the image of some books on the previous slide, where you think that, okay, one day maybe there'll be a book and you'll write, but it takes an entire process to make it happen and reach the form of that paperback that I just shared with you about 30 seconds ago. What are those steps like? This is what I want to share with you. And I hope that putting it into this 5P process will help you retain it better, will help you not lose sight of what this process is. And of course, as Peterson informed me before, this recording will also be available on the HRAI YouTube channel page. So at any point, if you need a refresher, you are more than welcome to go across and see it there. So as we go into this presentation and I lay out this process for you, I will refer to my own approach that I followed in a sense that maybe it can help you in a specific area that is of your liking. But at the same time, I will give broad-based guidance points that will apply to any kind of book writing exercise that you partake of. To make it slightly engaging and interesting, just like I tried to do in the book, at the end of each section, which is end of each of the 5 Ps, I will read out one poem which I have published in the book. So I hope that will again be something that will interest some of you. So I hope the context is clear, and if there are any early questions, any thoughts, feel free to share with me in the chat box. Let Peterson know, and we'll be happy to address those. Great. So coming into the meat of today's session, the first P, without thinking much, is really plan. You've got to plan about the entire book writing exercise. Now, this means that you need to answer some few fundamental questions, right? The one that's most important is why. Why do you want to write a book? Is it because it's a fashionable thing to do? Is it because, well, every second guy today is an author? You got to answer those questions really. And what happens if you write a book and it doesn't sell? Do you feel dejected, or do you feel still gratified that you at least managed to put in all that effort and publish a book which is available to someone? Even if one person benefits out of it, you feel great about yourself. So those are some of the questions that you have to answer yourself. And I saw some questions which some of you put in the form at the time of registering for this session, masterclass session. And very interesting questions. I think most of them hopefully will get answered during the course of this talk. But if some are left out, please feel free to put them in the chat box again at the end. Someone did ask about the core competence. How do you know what to write about? Well, clearly, the way I see it, if you look at, let's say, Sachin Tendulkar, and if he wants to write a book, or he wants to get someone else to do it for him in the form of a ghostwriter, the very fact is that he will be expected to write about cricket, right? He'll be expected to write about maybe leadership. He will be expected to write about maybe resilience. Those are things that come to mind, right? Now, would you imagine Sachin Tendulkar releasing a book around, let's say, modeling? And let's assume that he does that also once in a fit of just playfulness. Do you think someone will actually go and buy a book on modeling from Sachin? Wouldn't they prefer to do that from, let's say, Priyanka Chopra Jonas, right? So the core competence is something that you really need to identify for yourself. What is it that you stand for? What is it that you're knowledgeable about? What is it that people associate with you? Those are some of the questions that you need to ask yourself. In my case, for example, it was almost a no-brainer. I mean, I've been in the HR space for 18 years. That's all I've literally done after my graduation and getting into the corporate life. So it's really something that I lived in day in and day out. And there have been multiple experiences along the way, which today, frankly, with now my white hair, I feel confident about sharing with you. So that's the reason that my book personally was about HR, is about HR. And it's more, I would say, broad-based than HR. In fact, it's about leadership. So it doesn't matter if someone is from the domain of finance or someone is from a sales fraternity, because at the end of the day, leadership cuts across everything. The reality is that I have found a structure about in the book, which I will talk about in the next section. But it is really, really something that should cut through anyone and everyone. And that is really the target audience. In my case, for example, the target audience clearly is someone who's interested in becoming a leader, is interested in building a strong, stable career, preferably in the world of the corporate business world. But even for someone who's an entrepreneur, even for someone who's a freelancer, the lessons in leadership will remain the same. And therefore, to that extent, a college student who's just about deciding what line of work or what discipline one needs to follow, to someone who's already holding a pan-India, pan-globe senior assignment in a large organization should be, in my view, be able to benefit from this book, right? Do also consider the commitment, because book writing is not an easy job. I probably made it slightly simplistic by saying 5P process. But as we go through this presentation, you'll realize that there's a lot that each stage takes. And the topmost, obviously, is commitment. Do you have that commitment to really sit and work through all the stages and do all of the, I can say, compilation of different bits and pieces to actually translate it into this form. It's not easy, right? There's digital work involved, there's physical work involved, there's phone calls to be made, there is designing work involved, and you'll see all of that. Important question to also consider is, would you have any guides to support you along the way? Are there any people that you think you can reach out to who will be able to help you? I'm attempting to do that by putting this out there transparently in the form of a talk, in the form of a presentation, which should be of help to you. But also the great part today is, and I'm sure it's no secret, all of you are living in an online world. Pretty much everything is available there. You just need to invest some time and energy in going online, finding the right sources, reading through multiple sources to find the one solution or one approach that works best for you. So that's the first piece or the first aspect of the book writing process, which is planning. Very, very critical. Take a little bit of time on this if you need to, but jump into it only once you know that you're committed to it. Someone also asked in the questions that, why did I think that I can write a book, or how did I decide to write a book? To be honest, till at least 12 months ago, I don't think this was on the radar. I never thought I'd probably write a book. But having started writing for a lot of leading HR magazines who invited me initially in the form of guest articles, then I became a regular contributor. And I somehow started enjoying that whole writing process. And I realized that I did have a lot of experience and you would say expertise that I could share. So why not, if someone can benefit from it? Some people in the same fraternity, from the magazines and some of my close, well-wishers, when they saw my writings both in these magazines as well as on LinkedIn, they wrote back or they called me up and really, pushed me and said, "Why don't you do that?" And that's when somewhere 1 year ago, when I was having a personal coaching session with my coach, someone I respect very greatly, she asked me to kind of chart down and write down my goals for the next, let's say, 5-10 years and try and visualize that. And, I found myself spending a good 1 hour on that project, sitting down with myself in a closed room, just thinking through. And one of the things that I drew there in that visualization exercise was a book with the name Vikas on the front. And that's when I realized that somewhere inside, maybe I had this desire to see a book with my name on it. And I think it started there as a small, you can say, visualization exercise, which then translated 12 months down into the book that I'm very happy to be talking about today. So that's a little bit on the personal side. Now, this is the poem that I'll recite. It's a poem in the book, and it's called Bouncing Back. Goes very well with the section on plan, because you know that many a times plan A fails and you've got to get into plan B and plan C. So let me just read out this poem for you. Your life will throw many a curved ball. At times you'll even stumble and fall. Plans you made may fall slowly apart, pushing you to initiate a fresh restart. It is then that you must keep in mind that sweet success you'll surely find. All that is needed is a measure of grit, self-belief, and a never say die spirit. So I hope you like this rhyme and you absorb it, because I think in today's world, this is one of the most critical leadership traits that we must have, because there is volatility in the environment, there is unpredictability, and we will be expected to bounce back. It's okay to fall and fail, but bouncing back is critical. So keep that in mind as we move to the second P. And I don't know if you guessed seeing this image, but the second P really stands for prepare. In the case of writing a book, the preparation piece is extremely important, maybe more so than the actual writing, because that's where really you kind of do your own mental mapping, structuring, get into the details of what all is required, and then get into the actual writing bit, which is the next stage. So when you look at the preparation piece, clearly you need to understand what all does the book involve, right? what is the approach that you're going to follow. Then you must define a rough structure for it and also see if there is any collaboration or support of other people that is required. Let's get a little bit deeper into each one of these, and I'll throw in some aspects for you to understand. When you look at a book, very clearly, be it any kind of book, it will have certain sections or parts which they're called as the front matter, the principal text, which is nothing but the main content or the story in that book, and lastly, the back matter. Okay? Now, the front matter there on the right-hand side consists of all of these, and each one of them has a specific role to play. And I'm sure we may have read thousands of books over our lifetime, but not always do we give it a thought. And in fact, even I got into the intricacies and the differences of all these sections once I actually sat down to research on how to write my book and what I should be doing, right? So if you look at it very simply, the half title is nothing but the first piece that hits you once you open the cover and there is the title of the book. The half title is nothing but, typically sometimes when there is a subtitle, the first page is really just the main title. They don't show the subtitle. And then you have another page which kind of exposes the second title as well, the full title, right? So in my case, for example, it's HR in My Heart as the main title or the half page title. And when you look at the title page, it's HR in My Heart, Leadership Lessons Like Never Before. Then, of course, you have the copyright page, which is a standard page, which is there in all books, which is really saying one thing, that all the fault or all the plagiarism, if it's happened, or all the quotations, all of that, which the author has mentioned, is really the responsibility of the author and not of anyone involved in the printing and the distribution of the book. So that's really a standard practice which one has to adhere to. The next is the dedication, which is something you can choose to do. Most people do it. And in this case, you really dedicate that book to someone that you wish to honor or respect or love. And it's pretty straightforward in that sense. The epigraph is something that is typically a quote or a extract from another book, another leader's words, or something which somewhere formed an inspiration for your book, or something that falls in line with the tone of the book, and you want it just as a call out or a single view to make the interest the reader in going further into the book. So that's something that can also be included. The table of contents, all of us familiar with it, I'm sure, just an index or listing of the various chapters and their headings, so that everyone or the reader knows where one can jump to read a specific bit if one wants to do that. The foreword is a section which is written by someone else other than the author. You could invite a renowned person, named person, to do that for you if you have a connection. Obviously, what ends up happening is that the weightier the name of the person who's writing the foreword helps to attract more people to go deeper into the book or to pick up the book, because it adds a stamp of validation. Right? The preface is something which, in a sense, you can consider the profile of the book. So what is the book about? What inspired you as an author to write that book? Why did this book come about? Those are some of the answers that one typically shares in the preface. Then there is, of course, the acknowledgements, which is thank you or a note of gratitude to people that played a role in maybe your journey, maybe in helping you put that book in place, putting it out there for everyone else to read. And that's something that you should obviously do. And the last is, of course, the introduction of the prologue. Now, the introduction is really what happens in a case of a non-fiction book like the one that I've written. The prologue is what is typically in the case of a fiction book. And this is an introduction which gives a glimpse into what the book is about and how the chapters are laid out, or what is the construct of the book. In the case of a fiction book, for example, a prologue could be the backstory before the actual story begins. So it again, to incite the reader's mind, to whet his appetite so that he gets more and more into and engrossed into the book. So that's what the front matter is, extremely critical, and of course pretty standardized in a lot of ways. Most books would carry this. The principal text, your main subject matter body, the content of your book. Again, we will discuss this in this section. In fact, the approach, I'm linking it to that. In my case, I wanted to try out a different approach. I combined, like Peterson shared at the beginning, not only prose, which is paragraph writing or words, but poetry as well, because I would choose to believe, I'm not sure if many will agree, but I do have a knack for writing some decent rhymes. And I have been writing on some leadership related traits in the past. So I thought of building onto that and including them in the book itself. So the principal text in my case became not only the prose, but also the so-called poetry. And an example for someone else who may want to go down that path is that you could actually maybe combine prose with, let's say, cartoons, right, to illustrate your points and bring them out, or maybe even just certain graphics or graffiti. So it's about getting a little different, you can say, twist into your book, making it a little bit more attractive to the reader's eye. And today we know for a fact that the modern reader, for example, tends to like visuals, tends to like text which is not really very boxed in, formatted in that standard way, right? And to that extent, if you can play around a bit with this, that's something really up to your creativity. In fact, before I hit upon the poetry inclusion bit, I was also thinking of collaborating with another artist who's very well known in the space for doing digital art. And I thought, why not combine with someone and kind of co-author a book? Unfortunately, that conversation didn't kind of fructify. Our timelines were not matching. And then it struck me that the one thing that I feel is unique about me is the ability to write rhymes. Why not capitalize on it? So that's exactly the kind of approach I would recommend you to do, is because you've got to, at the end of the day, stand out, right? I mean, you just don't want to be another book sitting in some row somewhere that is probably difficult to reach. So the more interesting you can make it in the content is something that will definitely appeal. And of course, we'll talk a little later about how you get that whole differentiation out and visible to the target audience. The last component in the book structure is really the back matter, which is where you have the epilogue and you have your closure, in a sense, about the book. You also can add in here certain additional information. For example, an author bio. You can add in some details about how the readers can reach out to the author, ways to contact you in case any further information is required, or a listing of services that you provide, so that again, someone who's intrigued enough by a book can reach out to you, and that maybe becomes a business lead for you. So that's something that can also go in the back matter. The approach we briefly spoke about, but once you've kind of identified this approach, and again at this stage, very loosely, you also need to start thinking about how will the publishing happen, and we'll be talking about that in a subsequent session. There are, of course, agencies, individuals who can help you with that whole process. You can also go with the route that I've followed myself, which is self-publishing. So you've got to think about that. But when you look at the rough structure, just to give you a perspective, most books, at least initially, are in the range of about, are what we call 5 into 8 inch paperbacks, right? And each page of a book is in the standard format and standard font which is used in a Times New Roman or a Gandhi serif is about an 11 size which is used. When you combine this on an average and you pick up any book, you'll see that there are about, on an average on a page, about 30 lines. Each line has on an average about 10 words. So you need about 300 words or 350 words to fill up one page, top to bottom, right? When you convert that into, or you start thinking of a book, you've also got to start thinking of not just one page of 300 words, but multiple pages. And for a decent sized book, that number of pages count is somewhere in the region of 100, 120 is considered decent. So you got to goal yourself on writing at least 120 odd pages of about 300 words each, right? Now that's a lot of words, given that most of us don't do this full time, really, do we? But having said that, that's what you're going to have to put into a structure to understand where you have to head. And again, apart from this, you would have about 10, 20 pages, which, all those bullet points on the right-hand side, which you see, the copyright, the dedication, the epigraph, and all will take care of. So if you can put together content for about 100 pages, and you can plug in all the other sections that we spoke about, the front matter and the back matter, you would find yourself having a very decent 120, 140 page kind of book. Of course, the likes of John Grisham and others, their books tend to go into 350, 400 pages. So obviously they are full-time writers, and they are in a creative field, and it's maybe something you can also aspire to do. It's just that if you want to make it simple and want to start off, I would at least recommend looking at something as simple as this to begin with. And the collaborators I mentioned a short while ago, who are the other people who can collaborate with you on the book. You also need to keep in mind that you need to have somewhere mentally identify who's going to do your forward. For example, sometimes at the back of the book, for example, you also see, I don't know if you can see this clearly, but you have reviewers' quotes which you can print on the back cover. And for this, again, you need to reach out to some people that you might want to carry their quotes. And to that extent, once you've done that, then you can also start reaching out to them, letting them know that you're writing a book. And once the manuscript is ready, you will send it to them, and you'll be grateful if they can give you some comments to put into the book. In the case of the foreword, you'll at least need about 2 pages, which is about 600 words, like I discussed. So that individual, whoever he or she is, will obviously need to be someone who's willing to take out that trouble to, spend that time putting together that 600 word foreword for you. So keep that in mind, and then the right way that I do it, again, something that I will touch upon in the next section, which is penning, is that there's got to be a huge discipline around all of this. So let's see what that is about. But before we go there, another poem, like I promised you, is be detailed oriented, but again, something that fits in line with the theme of this section. When work is your calling, supremely infinite, it is critical to do everything more than right. It is not just enough to the surface only skim, for there's many a gap that can emerge within. In the finer aspects lie threats or opportunity that, unlooked at, can create problems plenty. Therefore, the devil lies in the detail, it is said. Stretch and execute to avoid being in the red. Clearly, I think the more structuring and the more preparation you can do at that initial stage will help you later down, because then the kind of process takes over on its own, in a sense. And the next stage, to introduce the next P, is pen. No rocket science there. You've actually got to start writing. And while the word is pen, I'm sure most writing nowadays happens on your computer keyboard, like it happened in my case. What you have to keep in mind, folks, is that there's got to be a discipline around this, and there's got to be the entire flow and the momentum of how you do it. The way I did it to bring continuity from the previous section is that I created an Excel sheet which had my chapters zoned out. I knew exactly what I was going to cover in the 20 chapters. And then I could track from there in terms of how much or what was the speed of writing, how many words I wanted to write per day. And then I had a rough idea about what timeline I would want to close the book in. So referring to that on a daily basis, making sure that I was looking at that Excel sheet, coloring the green cells green where I'd finished, and then moving on to the next chapter, that really helped me a lot. I had also somewhere identified the early morning period in terms of writing, because that's the time where I am in my household typically undisturbed. There are not too many people awake. One has peace of mind to think and put together whatever thoughts or ideas one has. And I think I would also recommend the same. For some people, I know it works well to do it late at the night. It's obviously difficult to do it while you're doing something else or engaged in your official work. So building a calendar around it, I think, is supremely important. And then tracking it with discipline. So in my case, again, and I must share this, I was extremely motivated by another fellow LinkedIn expert called Nimisha Chatterjee, who recently, 2 months ago, published a book, and she released it on her birthday. And somewhere my speed had slackened in the middle. But when I saw that, and I saw my birthday coming up 2 months down, and I knew that not too much of the book was left, I finally had, I would say, a goal that I could really target towards. And then when I locked that date in terms of deciding and making it known that, yes, on my birthday, which was 6th of March, last Saturday, thank you for the wishes, I decided that I would release that book. And then it was a question of working backwards, doing a simple Excel calculation of how many chapters to go, how many words to write, and how many I needed to do on a daily basis. So that's the bit I needed to take care of, and I managed to do that. What must be kept in mind is that when it comes to something like writing, it's not as simple as just making sure that an Excel is there and you have to hit those 300 or 600 words, right? The fact is that sometimes it's just not in the flow. It doesn't come creatively to you. So you've got to buffer in some amount of time to overcome those gaps. So make sure that you have some buffer there, because the worst thing you could do is really go and complete your book or hit that timeline having sacrificed some of the quality. But then you're doing disservice to yourself and, more importantly, to the reader. So don't push yourself too much on the timeline or the deadline, but push yourself on the quality and making sure that you are doing justice to the entire exercise. This stage also involves what is called the compilation, which is really that now I mentioned about the foreword, which is being written by someone else. So you've got to make sure that you get it in time and you plug it into your document. You've got to get in those reviews because you need to kind of publish them on the cover, and of course your content end to end. Now, when it comes to the content, you've also got to look at the whole publishing bit, which is something that we'll be shortly discussing. But just to touch upon it, documents like this typically can be, and I personally also wrote it in Word, MS Word. You can do it on your Google Doc as well. But the fact is that you've got to make sure that the sections are well aligned, the borders are standard, and all of that is extremely convenient today, I must tell you, thanks to some templates which are available again online. So it's not very difficult, but yes, you do need to have a decent level of comfort with using one of these word processors. And some of the finer aspects you can figure out either through the software itself or going online into a Google search process if you get stuck anywhere. And it's fairly straightforward as far as putting all this and compiling all this into the final manuscript, as it's called. The manuscript that actually goes out for publishing is in the form of a PDF. So once you've actually put it all together into one 120, 200 page kind of document, you then kind of convert it into a PDF, and that's what gets shipped out. So that's really on this chapter. The poem that I'll talk in or recite to you now is Have Pride in Your Work, which is again something that fits in to the theme of this particular section. At work, imagine yourself as a craftsman so great, who's creating a future for all with a vision innate. Own each part proudly of your daily deliverable and propel it well with drive and passion visible. So as you pursue perfection in the tiniest detail, you'll know for sure that you will never fail. Let then your chest swell with pride in your work that built with your own hands is your true worth. And this is something that even apart from leader, I think every individual, every professional should keep in mind, that when you do something with your own hands, and I see some of my community members here who are building great futures for themselves as individuals, as freelancers here on this conversation. The fact is that as a writer, you've got to own each comma and each period, each hyphen, and that's what will give you that pride. There might be a few mistakes here and there, which is fine. And in spite of all that happens during the whole publication process, they may still go through like it happened in my case. And I know there are a couple of errors out there, but that's the beauty, because that's my creation. It may not be perfect, but it's mine, and have that pride. So the next stage is, as you might have guessed it, seeing this lovely image, is publish, to get it into the form where it actually becomes a paperback that you can sniff and smell. Or maybe in some cases, many people nowadays prefer it to be an ebook, and that's great as well. I mean, I haven't done that yet, but I soon hope to do that so that it's accessible to a lot more people. Publishing is a little tricky. That's where you need to make a few hard calls. The first is, of course, like I touched upon earlier, would you be self-publishing or taking assisted publishing? Now, what's the main difference here? The main difference in the two, as the words indicate, is that in self-publishing, you pretty much go the whole hog yourself. In assisted publishing, you have the support of some people and some teams, some organizations who can do that for you. All right. Now, there's a trade-off, like all things. In self-publishing, your book will be available, like it is in my case, on one or two e-commerce stores. The disadvantage, of course, is that because you haven't paid anything upfront, it's pretty much zero cost. You end up losing or end up paying very high royalty. So your author profits are almost negligible, to be honest. In assisted publishing, you get the advantage of more listings, more platforms that the books are available on. You get people to guide you during the publication or publishing process. And to some extent, since you've paid some amount of money upfront, there is a lesser royalty that you're charged. So you get a higher chunk of the author profits, as it's called, or the book profits. Now, keep in mind that when it comes to publication, there is a very critical step that is involved before your manuscript actually goes out for publishing, and that is the editing and the typesetting stage. So like I shared, you can write in Word, you can write in Google Doc, but most of us are used to writing on standard document pages, right? Your typical A4 pages that we write corporate letters in or send mails out in. For books, obviously, there is different, you can say, margin settings. There's a different layout. Each section has its own nuances. There is a header, there's a footer. Something that I should have mentioned earlier, for example, in the content, in the main part of the book, the middle, you have numbers, page numbers written in Arabic numerals. In the case of your front matter, if you open any book and see, it's not Arabic numerals, it's Roman numerals in small case. So these are certain, little, I can say, intricacies of the book typesetting or editing process, which are well known to people in the publication space. And but readers who are not authors may not even understand or have noticed these very clearly. Now, editing is something which is very critical because when you write, there is a certain style you follow, certain words that you use. And there is a chance that you may become repetitive in some cases. You may make errors in some cases where maybe just out of habit, you're using words in the wrong context or spelling them incorrectly. But when you have the help of someone who is basically another set of eyes, so a lot of these errors can actually be taken out of the equation, right? So in my case, for example, I was very lucky. You'll be surprised to know my 11-year-old daughter did the first level of proofreading. She was so excited that I was writing a book. So she managed to come in every day and just check out whichever chapter I had written and help me make a few tweaks here and there. Post that, my sisters came to my rescue for the final editing because both of them happen to be prolific readers. One of them happens to have studied English honors and has graduated in that. And I pretty much knew that these ladies, as far as their communication skills go, they're pretty much top of the class. So they took care of that element for me, pro bono, of course, needless to say. And the typesetting is something that I mastered on my own using my publisher's templates. Now, it's the publisher that I used, and I found it extremely helpful. Feel free to go and try them out. Is Notion Press. Their self-publishing was extremely smooth. I was able to, from the website, download a proper template from their tools, and within that, all you really need to do is cut paste your chapters from your Word document and put them into that template. It's as simple as that. So it takes care of the numbering, it takes care of the typesetting. You can do a little bit of the adjustments, which in my case was required because, like I pointed out to you earlier, I combined prose with poetry. So it wasn't, my book isn't very straightforward, right? It's got chapters in the form of prose, and then it breaks into a few poems, then comes back to prose, then it breaks into poems again. So in my case, I had to play around a bit with the typesetting, not very straightforward. But having said that, I mastered it. I mean, when I played with that software, I made a few mistakes and I managed to figure it out. So there's no reason that you won't. That's the only point I want to stress upon here. And then, of course, it comes to the front cover and back cover. This is real estate, which you can use for your book's benefit. The cover here that I showed, I kept it very straightforward, just the title of the book, the name of the person who's written the foreword for me, my name, of course. And on the back cover, I used it to the fullest. I used it for the reviews, quotes that I talked about. I used it for a brief author bio, for a link to my website. So these had to be designed. Right? Now, when it comes to one of the templates or using a self-publishing, the platform again gives you very good standard cover formats, images which are free to use, which you can pick from the platform itself and choose them as your cover. I took a different route. I used the help of a graphic artist known to me who's done a great job. Couldn't thank him enough. And I managed to get it personalized to this extent. Now, that's a choice you can take. You need not do that. Like I said, the template can surely suffice if you want to make it simple for yourself. And of course, in publishing, the timeline is also critical because when you're giving it to an external party like an organization, and I know cases where other authors have told me that sometimes 2 weeks is just not 2 weeks because they have other clients to deal with, other books that they are also editing, typesetting. So it can become 4 weeks, it can become 5 weeks. It all comes down to, have you found the right publisher? Have you found the right, you can say, relationship manager at the end to manage your relationship, who understands you well, who knows how critical your book is, what your style is, and how he or she can add value to this whole exercise. So the timelines become critical, but I'm given to understand if you look at the assistant publishing model, it can take about 4 to 5 weeks at a minimum is what you should be looking at. For self-publishing, typically about a week to 10 days is what you can pretty much do the whole thing. In my case, for example, I just had to upload the finished PDF into the platform. Notion Press took about 3 days to validate, verify that it wasn't plagiarized. All the settings were fine. The book was worthy of being printed, and it was up there in cyberspace. So that's how publishing works. I'll just check the chat for a few seconds. I have some few comments here. Lovely. Let me continue with this and come back to some of the questions that I see there. Thank you so much for the nice comments so far. So this is how the book ended up looking. I mean, just to give you a glimpse into it, some of you who've bought it may already be close to receiving it end of this week. I'm given to understand it should be hitting your mailing box. But this is how my pride of work looks like, and I'm extremely thrilled to showcase it to you. The poem that I'll bring in here is Collaborate, because honestly, this book couldn't have been anything without the collaboration that I got from everyone across the ecosystem, whether it's the reviewers, whether it's my graphic designer, whether it's my family members. So at our workplace, we are all meant to collaborate like pieces of a puzzle that seamlessly integrate. It is when we join hands and do our own little bit that parts of our disjointed stories begin to fit. The future that we are trying to together build emerges before us with bright colors filled. To top it off, it'll feel great as you meet your aim and others are there beside to share the fame. So in my case, for example, I've made sure that the acknowledgements carry the names of all these people who've played a role. There are people who I mentioned who just kind of showed me that, yes, writing a book is possible because they were authors. There are people, the ones that I name, my family members, who actually helped me in the work. There are the graphic design affairs who helped me with that lovely cover and back cover. His name is there on the back cover, right there in print. I want the world to know what a great job he's done. And I think I'm extremely grateful to Harjeet and Yuvraj, again, stalwarts who took out the time to read my manuscript. And therefore, the little bit I could do to honor them is put that review on the back cover and, just let their names also be in another form, in another way out there in the world. And before I enter the last P, just want to check with Peterson if he has anything to share. Does he want to do a poll?
No, Vikas, you can go ahead. And after you share that, we can move into the question and answer session.
Lovely. So the last bit, extremely critical part of the book publication process. Maybe this gives you an idea. It's promote. Your job is possibly only half done if you've kind of written the book. You've got to promote it. You've got to make it visible out there. Let's face it, if you go to Amazon, there are about 2.5 million books. It's not easy. It's not easy to get your book there. It's a great job done, I would say, if you manage to put your book up there. I mean, after all, it's your sweat and you've taken the trouble to put everything there. But at least promoting it, making it visible so that others can get it is an extremely critical angle as well. And for that, again, the assisting publishing piece that we spoke about talks and also covers what is called the whole marketing side of the book publication process, where the more you pay, the publication portals or agencies will look at creating events for you to publish and talk about your book. So they can be open houses, they can be webinars, they'll have newspapers, magazines, reviewers, they'll ship them free copies, they'll get them to write reviews. So all of that can happen, but yes, that costs money, right? Nothing comes for free. But having said that, I think what works well, if you really are working on, let's say, a tight budget, or you don't want to throw away money, is that you can create a website for your book. A lot of people do that. So in my case, I haven't done that. But since I have my own existing website, vikasdua.in, there is a whole page and section devoted to the book there as well. There is a lot you can do nowadays on social media. There are enough and more tricks that one can deploy. Right from, if you go to my LinkedIn or my Twitter banner today, my Facebook banner, you'll find this particular banner there, which is an announcement to the world that the book is out and it's available on these 2 or 3 online platforms, and it's something that one can easily pick up. There are campaigns that you should design and run, and these campaigns should ideally start even prior to your book's release, because you need to create a hype and really go into a marketer's mind. So if you have a little passion or interest in that area, or you have friends who are sort of experts in that zone, pick their brains, take their help. I did a book trailer which was pretty well received. That's something that is also becoming a norm nowadays, which is where you introduce a book with a little bit of teaser element to it, which doesn't give away too much, but at the same time intrigues people and lets them know that, hey, 2 weeks down, something's going to land, and it sounds pretty interesting. I'll keep an eye out for it. So that book trailer was a video format, which I made it to look like a Hollywood kind of trailer of a movie. So do catch it if you get a chance, if you haven't already. And of course, campaigns all through the initial month or 2 months of the book is something that you should be planning for. What you can do is, and I have a sample to showcase you on the next slide, is pick up on some themes which are relevant at that point, or share your gratitude to people that you featured in the book, or excerpts from the book. So there's pretty much a lot that you can do in that space. Like I said, just think like a marketing person. How would he or she do it? Then, of course, there's family, friends, and well-wishers that one can let them know that the book is out. You can send them the link to make it easier. See, today's world is all about convenience. right? You've got to make sure that if I see a banner of Vikas's book, the link is easily there where I can click on it and go and complete that transaction in the next 5 minutes. So that's the approach that you should follow, wherein if you're even posting something on the book, make sure that in the comments, you're adding a link for the book. In case you're telling your friends and family, make sure that you tell them that the book is available. If there's a friends and family discount, share the code with them. Some of the platforms like Notion Press even allow you to create some discount coupons for limited periods of time. And then there are, of course, the author copy route that you can follow, in which case you can pick up bulk copies and then send them out to well-wishers or to people who are influencers and hope that maybe some of them will pick it up and talk about it in one of their sessions. And that gets you further mileage for your book. So that's what you need to do. But very, very important is also that on platforms like Amazon, for example, you have book reviews. So encourage people that who've picked up the book to write a review for you to share their frank opinion on how they found it. Try not to game the process, because I know people who use that to get fudged reviews in and they found their accounts locked. So make it, let it be genuine. If your work is good, it will get the traction it deserves. And there's no reason it shouldn't. The online world rewards creativity, effort, hard work. So make sure that you go for it. The campaign, simple example, in fact, just this Monday, yesterday, in fact, which was Women's Day, it just struck me that by some coincidence, and honestly, this was not deliberate, this is the dedication page of my book. And I happened to notice that it's all women for some reason, because I think what I am today is largely because of the women that have played a role in my life, not only in my family, but at work. I've had the best women bosses, women team members, women colleagues. And I think I just kind of respect them to another level. It just happened that here on my first page, the dedication page of my book, all the women who was most maybe close to me found themselves featured, and I thought it was the right day to put it on my LinkedIn handle. And that's the post that went out yesterday. So the last poem in today's session, which I'll recite for you, is to show gratitude. As all leaders, I think we must. And it goes as this. At work, you may be regarded as quite a sharp hypo. That's high potential for those not in the HR world. Someone that consistently seems to rock the show. It will surely add wings powerful to your career flight and help you soar high as you aim for the skies bright. But remember always that there are many others too, that in that lovely journey stood solidly beside you. So make sure you adopt the most promising attitude, the one that remembers to show heartfelt gratitude. Clearly, I think if I have to end this session today and this entire talk and exchange with you, gratitude is what I have. Gratitude is what I have for you, for spending a time with you, time with me today, for HRAI for making this happen, to get this word out to more and more people. And at the end of the day, that's really what we end up working towards. It's not really the compensation. It's not really the titles. The more gratitude you give, the more gratitude you'll receive. You'll find that. And just to recap the process, very simple, 5 Ps, keep them in mind. Plan, prepare, pen, publish, and promote. Take each one of these in stages and it'll be a pretty much of a cakewalk. You know my LinkedIn. I think HR has been kind enough to share that in the chat window. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, even outside after the seminar, while I'll take some of those which have now come in. And thanks once again for all your companionship for the last 1 hour or so. It's been amazing sharing and opening up some of my learnings with you.
So before we move into the Q&A session, we'll be initiating the poll. Request all the participants to kindly share your feedback. So while you're sharing your feedback, would request you all to post your questions related to our today's session. So because we have one question from Dr. VLN,
Sure.
it says, can commitment, that is focus, trigger writing a book in non-competent domains? In other words, parallel interests have been entering into our awareness radar and cold stimulate interest. Most interest with time. Any guide in this regards?
Great question. To Dr. Viren, my perspective on this very honestly would be that when you're looking at sharing a book, right, and we discussed it early on, we're talking of almost 30,000 words as a bare minimum, right? And when you look at 30,000 words, it's not a small amount. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of knowledge, passion about the particular area. So unless one is doing it over a long term in terms of building that expertise, making sure one is picking up relevant knowledge, and then going ahead and back closing the cycle and putting it back into the book content, it might be difficult in my view. Therefore, commitment is important from the perspective of making sure that yes, there is an end goal in sight. You have a timeline that you want to meet. It's not something that will happen when it happens, because in that case, it may never get that attention from you that it deserves. And to that extent, I think commitment is therefore very critical from the point of view of making sure that you get the job done. And competency is a very critical element there, because if you know the subject inside out, then it's easier to share, live up to that commitment, follow that discipline tracker, which I talked about, and make sure that you finally meet that goal of writing a book. I hope that answers your question in some way.
Thank you so much, Vikas, for the answer. We have another question from Sam. Does assisting publishing help you get better distribution? If that is so, how and in what manner? Isn't that a better option? What are the deciding factors to make the call between the two publishing, that is self-publishing and assisted publishing?
Correct. So great question. Again, it really actually ends up tying back to the question as to what is your objective or aim with respect to the book, your target audience. Is it something you're doing for personal gratification? Is it something that you're doing to actually earn money out of, make it a, you can say, a revenue engine for yourself? Definitely assisted publishing will help you gain better distribution, because you almost get the army of the publishing house to support you, to leverage a lot of their own existing network connections, methods, programs to get you that added visibility. So there's no two ways about it. But there is obviously you got to balance out your own personal aspirations out of the book versus the money that you're willing to spend. So just to give you a perspective, the figures that I have seen in my research that I did was something about 14,000 at the bare minimum for assisted publishing, which gives you a few basic features. And then you can go the whole hog, where you can spend over a lakh and a half, where there's good publicity blitz and sessions with experts, and you can say interviews and so on and so forth. So it really comes down to ultimately deciding, is that expense important or valuable for you at that particular point? Is the reach more important for you? Or do you think that with your own network, you can feel fairly enough get a decent word out there?
Very informative, Vikas. Thank you so much. Our next question is from Diksha. She mentioned, you talk about the book writing in a very beautiful way. Please share how you keep up the enthusiasm so far. Any message to the young writers to manage and finish book as per aim and timelines?
So again, Diksha, great question. I think when it comes to enthusiasm, knowing you, I think some of your energy seems to rub off on us, even virtually. So you're someone with great energy, and I think anyone watching this should definitely follow Diksha Dio. But to answer your question, I think the reason the enthusiasm is up is because I'm very passionate about this book. Like I shared earlier, somewhere I didn't know it was maybe lying dormant inside. A few people encouraged me. I put it out there in my goals, in my visualization exercise. And I myself am surprised that in less than 12 months, I managed to put together this book. I'm really thrilled with the output. And I just feel so grateful that I got a chance and actually managed to do that. As far as the discipline is concerned, I think what ends up happening, and it happened in me also, because at the same time as I was writing this book, Diksha, you're also aware, I'm building another parallel, you can say, startup. And it's not easy, right? Because at the end of the day, we have 24 hours. We want to prioritize all that's important to us. So a book is a very personal exercise, at least till the time it's being written and not yet published. So it's easy to kind of put it on the back burner and miss out on a few days of writing. But what I found worked for me was when midway through the process, I actually created that tracker, an Excel tracker with the chapters, with the word count, with the titles of the relevant rhymes which I had to add into each chapter, because each chapter has 3 rhymes to it, which are relevant to the chapter. So I had to make sure that the rhymes that I was writing were also in sync with the theme of the chapter. And therefore, once I had that entire framework in place and a tracker in place, then it became easy for me to see the progress. The biggest mistake I made in the first 6 months of my book writing exercise was that I didn't have that tracker. I thought I would just keep writing and go in the artistic way of, just being creative. But I think to some extent, a little bit of science is required along with the creativity when it comes to writing a book. And that's the reason the book happened as per my timelines. And that's the book, I think, that's the approach I would guide young writers to follow. That bring in some of the science and discipline in. It's not anything negative, won't take away anything. Yeah, don't force yourself to write on a bad day where you just don't feel it in you. You can always cover up some other day, but at least have some sort of a roadmap in front of you to kind of work towards. Hope that answers.
Absolutely, Vikas. So very inspirational. Thank you, Vikas, for such beautiful poems that you have shared with us today. And definitely we will go ahead with the kind of inspirational 5 Ps of yours. Okay, I'm sure all our participants would have benefited out of this insightful session. So before we conclude with our today's session, we would also want to thank all the association members, that is Geisha, NASCOM COE, LinkedIn Local, Talgro, TLE, and Gliptop for supporting these HRAI events. To know more about these associations, request you to kindly visit the link provided in the chat window. Thank you once again, dear speaker, and our participants for joining us today. Do join us for our next session on connecting the dots on the topic HR Rebound, Defined and Aligned on the 11th of March, 2021. Request you to kindly register for this event at the link mentioned in the chat window. That's it from us today. See you soon. Stay safe, take care, and bye for now.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kaz.
Pleasure to be.
Thank you, Shyam. Can hereby conclude with our today's session.